Hi everyone, welcome to the skills session. As always, make sure, if anyone comes in, they want to turn off their video, feel free to. Oh, he's focusing in. But today we'll be hearing from Suzann as she talks about script writing and how to make it a big success. So I'll pass it off to her.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Suzann, and I just want to say thank you to Sydney and Caitlin for having me be a part of this. I'm really excited to get into this presentation with you guys. And I know you all received my bio. I was an FTT major at Notre Dame, and I'm a producer now. So I typically focus on narrative feature films in the independent space. So my talk's going to be really focused on how to prepare a script for success from a producer's perspective. I am a producer, so my talk won't cover too much about how to specifically write the script, but rather about how to go from having a script and to getting it made. So just kind of an overview there, and I'll just dive right in. So I'm going to share my screen here. And I believe that everyone should be able to see that, and I'll enter full screen. Okay. Let me put this off to the side. Okay, so here we go. Script to screen, preparing script for success. I hope you guys like my movie font. Okay, so these are the points I'm going to kind of go over. So we're going to talk about screenplay, ensuring you have a great viable script, what exactly that means, especially from a producer's perspective. So I'm going to talk a bit about not just the creative points of why a screenplay is so good, but why it's good logistically and how it's being assessed in a producer's standpoint. Your supporting materials. So I'm specifically going to talk about pitch decks. That's something that every script will need in order to support it and when you're pitching it. Budgets, I'm generally going to go over that because that's not typically going to fall into, especially screenwriters and even producers like myself, that's not our skill set. So I'm going to briefly go over it because knowledge about it is very helpful, and kind of talk about who exactly handles that and how it's good for you to have as part of your package. Then I'm going to talk about attaching the right people, so your director and talent, how that helps your script get made and how you can find the right people to match that script well. I'm going to briefly go over financing, the basics of funding at various budget levels, which is, I will just say now, a very complicated process. So I'm going to do kind of like the basics. And obviously any questions that might come up, I'm happy to answer. But financing is kind of its own beast. So it's going to be kind of an overview there. And it's going to briefly talk about going from development phase into pre-production and what takes you there. Okay, so screenplay. So for writers specifically, you have an idea. Awesome. Now what? So I listed a helpful source that I really like. It's a book called Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. I really highly recommend it. It breaks down how to write a script so well, so easily. And a lot of screenwriters I know have used that, even if it's just for reference. So definitely look into that. And then also script coverage. So script coverage is you send it to various things. You can send it to production companies, you can send it to services online. And what they do is they assess your script basically on a scale. So from like 1 to 10, they talk about your dialogue, your structure, your story, the concept, and they kind of give you a range of points, or maybe it's 1 to 5. And they rate it on this scale. And then they give it a recommend, they give it a consider or a pass. And you're always looking for the recommend. Another thing that script coverage does, which is really helpful, is they give you unbiased notes. So a lot of times when you have a script and you're kind of passing it around between friends and producers or directors, you know them typically. And so they're going to maybe not be as honest with you or not think about it as critically as you might want them to. So script coverage is really helpful because it kind of is someone you don't know. It's a third party. They're going to give you a really good perspective. And obviously these notes are not things that you have to take. It's just so you can allow yourself to see the script how other people might be seeing it. And that way, if you don't want the story to go in a certain way that maybe they're suggesting, you can at least make the story that you do want to tell more clearly. So maybe that they're seeing things that they're not, that you want them to see that might not quite be there. So those are two things I would definitely suggest: save the cat and getting script coverage. And for producers that are not writers, so you've been sent a screenplay to make, so this is kind of my realm, what I do. So I spend a lot of time giving notes, and I work with my other partners to the writers. And I also recommend script coverage again. So we send it out for coverage typically, and we make sure that the script is a recommend. And yeah, we just collaborate with the writer and make sure that we're all like really passionate about the story. We really believe in it, it has a good message, and you know, whatever things that are important to you as a producer, that the script is delivering in that sense. So things to remember: expect notes and collaboration. So I feel a lot of times when a writer has a script, they kind of are just like, yes, this is it, I'm done, go make my movie. And that's just, I've never seen that happen ever. So when you have a script, just be ready for that. It's not an insult. No one's saying you're a bad writer. And in fact, if people are giving you notes, it's because they really like it and they want to work with you on it. Because the easy thing is to say, oh, it's a pass, it's not for me. But if they're like trying to give you notes, that means they want to collaborate with you, they want to help you. So see that as a big positive. And right here, I think you guys can see my mouse, but right here on the right side of my screen, this piece of paper basically is a very simple example of what coverage kind of looks like. So at the top, they kind of have just like basic information, the title, the date they got it, etc. They have a brief synopsis here, or they have a log line and a brief synopsis. And then down here, you can kind of see very in small font, the levels that they're judging it on. So concept, plot and storyline, characters, and they give it a grading system. This one had great, good, fair, and not applicable. So that's just a kind of what you would expect to see when you're getting back coverage. And then this here is a picture of the Save the Cat cover, so it's easily recognizable for you guys. Okay, so then another thing to remember: story first, logistics second, but knowing where to cut production costs in your story helps. So I'll give you an example. A film that I am currently working on is a one location film. It only has 4 characters. The story is awesome, but being able to say that with financiers or people I'm attaching or even scheduling the film, being able to say like, oh, it's one location and I only have to work with 4 actors, makes it like a much more attractive thing to get involved in than as opposed to like it's a super complicated story with a lot of moving parts. And obviously I don't want to say like, oh, try to write the simplest story you can just for the sake of trying to get it made, because you always want to think about the story first. But I just wanted to put that in there, that sometimes when you are writing a story, you know what you want to say. Just thinking of different ways to say something in a simpler manner can really help your script get further and move along more quickly. So that's just a nice thing to keep in mind, especially when you're writing or as a producer when you're reading a script. It also helps you give notes a little bit better. You can say like, hey, how about we move this scene to a location like this instead, that you know is going to be easier to shoot in, and whatnot. So that's just a general note. Another thing is you want to understand the genre and audience really well. You want to make sure that you understand if this is a commercial script or an art house script. A commercial script is going to have different types of talent, a different director, different financiers, and that goes for an art house. And they also typically go down different paths for distribution. So kind of just preparing yourself early for that path is very helpful, and you can plan your sales, your distribution, and the people you get involved more accurately. And then this is just general legal matters. Obviously, there's like so many entertainment lawyers that you could talk to, but I would always recommend copywriting the script pretty early. It's very easy to do. You could do it online. It doesn't take very long, and it's like, I don't know, not very expensive. It's like $30, I think, maybe. But it's really helpful to get that done early because you're going to need it eventually. And it's easy and in your control. And also, if you make changes to the script and you do notes, you don't have to copyright it again. That copyright holds as long as it's the same, it's the same source material. And also when you're sending out your script, try to do a watermark across the page, which is also a very easy thing to do because that kind of just protects your material a little bit more too. Especially as you're kind of like blasting it out to a lot of people. as you get further like towards production. Watermarks are always helpful. Oh, I don't know why I did that. There it goes. Okay, so your supporting materials, kind of touched on this earlier on. Pitch decks. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these or have seen them before, but a pitch deck or a lookbook, which are kind of the same thing. They're about 10 to 12 pages. It's basically an overview of your visuals and tone of your story. It goes over the characters pretty briefly, also has bios of the people that are currently attached in there. And a resource for making these is called canva.com. That's what I use. And it's free. It's really user-friendly. So you don't need something like Photoshop. You don't need anything expensive like that. You could just use that website and it's really awesome. And over on the right here are 2 examples of some pitch decks here. So you could see like this one page is a mood board, and it's kind of just like you're trying to show what the movie might look like a little bit, and kind of giving an overview of the style and tone. Okay, so yeah, the pitch decks are used to send to anyone you really want to get involved, or to gain interest from companies and financiers. So I would say I send a pitch deck almost every single time I send this. So they kind of go hand in hand, and it's just a visual overview that a person can quickly get a feel for what you're going for. And it kind of makes people excited more quickly. So, you know, sometimes reading a 90-page script, no one's going to like jump right in and get it done, you know, overnight usually. So having a pitch deck is really helpful because they can immediately open it, scroll through, and kind of get an idea of what you're going for. It could also be really helpful to have a sizzle video to pitch the idea of the film. This is like a proof of concept or a conceptual short film. This isn't necessary, but some people do it and it is very helpful. So that's just kind of like, hey, this is the movie I want to make. And then you go and make like a really short 5-minute version of that. That can be anything from just visuals. It could be an actual story. And that's kind of like up to the filmmaker. I wouldn't say that that's necessary, but I have seen people do it, and it does help a lot. But definitely the pitch deck, that's kind of, you kind of need it. Okay, so here in a little bit bigger are 2 more samples of pitch decks. So on the left here, these are 2 different movies, by the way. On the left here, you can see kind of like, it gives the overview of what the movie is, but it's like stylized, you know? So one of the themes of this movie is that the main character does a lot of crossword puzzles. So that's why the writer incorporated this kind of style. It's also kind of like I don't know, it has like a historical kind of vibe to it. So, you know, the ripped page, it's burned on the edge. You kind of get the idea there. And it has just the overview of what the movie is, who it's going to be directed by, and the log line. So it's like you can open the pitch deck, you get right to the idea, and you kind of get a feel for the vibe. And over here on the right side, on this one, you can also see it's like a very neon type of coloring. You can kind of understand what the director is going for here. It kind of has like a Nightcrawler-esque sort of style to it, which I really like. And just the general overview of what the plan is here. So you kind of understand, like, when you're kind of presenting what you're trying to do with your film, you do it like within this style of the pitch deck. So yeah, I wanted to show you guys these 2 examples, which can be really helpful. Okay, so budgets. Like I said in the beginning, this is very specific skill set, and one that I don't even have. So budgets are created by professional line producers for TV. So a line producer is the person that will create the budget. They will come on set and oversee your budget. They will typically do all of your hiring. They will do your expense reporting, your accounting, and whatnot. So they're kind of in charge of this side of things. And the reason why I say that this is not my skill set, because there are so many elements and rules, unions, and things like that, that it's just hard for one person to know all these things. And line producers do know all those things. So it's their job to kind of understand all the SAG regulations. If the crew is unionized, what that means. If the director is unionized, what that means. So that's why you want a line producer to do your budget. Now, that's not to say that you can't make your own just for the purpose of getting like a short film made or something like that. You absolutely can. I'm just saying for like a more professional, 90-minute film that's going to have a real budget with financing and all of that, you're definitely going to need a budget eventually from a professional line producer. So you can go to a line producer and say like, hey, I really want to keep this under whatever budget you might have in mind. Can you do that? And then they have kind of like a cap, as opposed to just going, here's my script, go make a budget. I find it's much more helpful to have a top dollar amount to tell them to try and stay under. And this is really important, applicable for feature films. I wouldn't say that it's like the most important with like short films or music videos, or things like that. Those projects definitely have budgets, but I'll just say like for the purpose of getting a film made, and getting a script off the ground, when you have a budget as a part of your package, it kind of just like shows a sense of legitimacy. It kind of shows that you have everything together, and that you have a course of action, and that you're also working with very professional people, that are trusted and vetted, which is very important. A top sheet is the first page of the budget, and it's a boiled down version of the budget. So just to say, budgets are like 30 pages. They're really, really long. And they all look like this on this right side. So you can see like story rights writer, producer unit, all these have a dollar amount that go with them. So on the right side of this page would be an amount that kind of equates with each person or department, basically. And this is a top sheet over here. So this is a boiled down version of the budget. So if I were to show you a completed budget, you would look at, let's say, production staff, you would find that in the budget, and it would be broken down into like 3 more categories, with a different dollar amount for each category. And that goes the same for art department, your set dressing, etc. So a top sheet is really helpful because it's just like, hey, here's all our departments, here's the totals for each department, and here's how much the movie's going to cost. So you can see at the very, very bottom, it says total below the line, total above the line, and then it has the totals above and below the line, and that will be your total budget on the right side here. The difference between above and below the line, above is right at the top here. So it includes writer, director, talent, and producers. And then below the line is basically the crew, like camera department, art department, all of that, visual effects, etc. It's kind of like the set operation. So that's just the difference between those 2 items there. So yeah, top sheets are really helpful, especially when you're looking to partner with companies and financiers, because they'll typically only request the top sheet, not the entire budget. And it's just to show them like, hey, you said your budget was whatever, 1.2 million, like, can you show me your top sheet to make sure like what you said is accurate? And then you can send them your top sheet. And that, like the line itemized budget, like the 30-page document typically only stays within the production circle. Like it doesn't even really get shared with even the director sometimes, unless they're producing, because it's usually like, you don't want everyone to see what every department is budgeted at. So that way they're not like, hey, art department has more money than me. Can I have more in camera department? It's like, no, it's done by a professional for a reason, and you don't want to be in a position where you have to explain that. So that's why it's like, just hold that close to the chest if you do have a very long budget, and just only share the top sheet if necessary with the people who request it. Okay, so attaching the right people. So let's say you have your script, you really love it, it's in a good place, you've gotten all of your notes done, you have a budget in the works, you have your pitch materials ready. So now it's about, okay, well, are you ready? Well, no. What you have to do now in order to get financed is to attach the right people, which becomes your package of the film. So when you start to look into financing, you're basically presenting not only the script, but also the people that are involved in it, because typically that's what people are financing in, not necessarily the story. That story does play a big part, but I will say that usually people are like, oh, who's in it? And then I'll think about partnering with you because they're more interested of who's on screen. That also goes for directors. A lot of times, like an A-list director can get a movie greenlit. But a lot of times a script is a writer director. So the writer sometimes wants to also direct, which is very common. And then also attaching other producers, people with like perhaps accolades or have won an award or are very more experienced than you. Those are other people that you might want to attach. And then cast. So casting is kind of an unspoken weird thing, especially when you're trying to attach like big talent, because that is like, you have to kind of navigate this world of agents and what offers to make and how much and all of that. So it's important to know what your budget is early, so that way you know how much money you have to spend on talent. And also the kind that you're making, like I said, more commercial or more indie art house. Then you know, like, okay, do I need like Tom Hanks in this, or can I actually get away with just having maybe a TV level actor, or maybe no names, you know? So it kind of helps you make that choice a little bit. So making offers, attaching talent to help your funding process, and communicating with the director for creative choices. So the director is really going to be like, hey, yeah, I like that person that you suggested, and you're suggesting them because you kind of can tell that having that type of talent attached will help you get funded at that budget level. So you're going to be like presenting these choices to the director, and making sure that they at least like them creatively, and knowing that it's going to help your package. And then auditioning, I mean, that's kind of, you know, that's pretty easy to understand. When you are funded and you're in prep, you can have auditions however you'd like, but it usually comes when you're like about to go into production. I wouldn't recommend auditioning before you're ready, because it's just kind of like not where your attention needs to be. If you're really trying to get a script made and it's a real movie and you're really trying to take the time to get it funded properly, then I would say to look into making offers to real, like, you know, established talent, especially for your lead roles, and then getting into auditioning when you're a little bit further along. And I just want to say, this isn't to say that you like have to have big name talent. You don't. But for higher level budget, it is almost like a requirement. So financing your script, that kind of goes into from talent into financing. So like I said in the beginning, financing is highly complicated. It's something that has a lot of different ways to do it. And you've probably heard this, there's a million ways to make a movie, and there's really not like a set path. That goes for financing as well. Sometimes you could like know people that are just like really rich and want to give you all the money right up front and be the sole investor. That does happen. But then there's other ways to break it down if you don't quite have that access. And I would say it's better to break it down into different categories of financing, because it allows you to prepare your script a little bit more accurately, and you can get into production a little bit more smoothly, instead of having like this giant chunk of money and you have like no idea where to allocate it. So this is just going to be a brief overview of these basics and what they kind of mean. And I am completely happy to answer any questions at the end about this, and you know, if this is at all confusing or a lot. So when you're ready to accept funds, you first want to start an LLC and a bank account for your film. So another thing that I feel like is a surprise to a lot of people, each movie is its own business. It's an LLC. So you set up an LLC for your movie because it's a business that people are going to invest in and then make money off of. At the end, you sell your business, like you sell the movie, and that is where your funds are going to come from and for profit. So every movie you've ever seen is its own business, which is like kind of crazy to think about, but it's true. And especially in indie filmmaking, that's something that you kind of have to keep in mind. You don't have to set up an LLC early. You can kind of do it when you're, you know, getting ready to accept funds. And then you can split up your budget. It's typical for larger budgets. So like the smaller budgets, I would say under 250,000, you don't really need to do this, but if it's above that, it's helpful. So I'm going to talk briefly about sales numbers based on cast. Sales numbers come from sales agencies, and sales agencies are the companies that sell your film to distributors. producers can go directly to distributors, and that's very typical, but a sales company just has those contacts a little bit more easily, and they can kind of negotiate a little bit better than usually producers can. So that's why they're very helpful. So sometimes when you go to a sales company early and you have a cast attached to your script, you can say, hey, based on my cast, what do you think my movie is going to make? And you can see on the right side here of my screen, I have something called, it says foreign take estimates, US take estimates, and soft money. We'll just ignore soft money right now because that's a financing term that isn't quite relevant in this scenario. But specifically for foreign take estimates and US take estimates, these numbers over here on the right, the low, mid, and high, are from a sales company that assessed a film based on cast, and gave it these kinds of numbers associated with that cast for what they think they could sell it to. So foreign take estimates are when a sales company goes out besides the US and they go to each territory, like they go to Italy, they go to Russia and every country, and they go to the distributors there, the buyers there, and they say, for this cast and this type of genre, what do you think you would buy this film for? And they do that with every single foreign territory. And then they add it all up. And then these are the numbers that they get for these low, mid, and high price. And now I'll say that the high price is what they're saying is the top dollar amount they think that they would get from a buyer. The mid price is kind of what they're going for. And the low price is kind of like, okay, that's a worst case scenario with those buyers. But they typically always ask for the very highest, and then they hope to land in the middle. And then the same thing for the US take estimates is the same idea. The sales company will go to, let's say, like Lionsgate or somebody and be like, okay, what would you buy this for based on the cast? And they would do the same thing. And then they put those numbers in there. So then these gross estimates down here are your low, mid, and high price of the estimates. So this also helps you when you're creating a budget as well. Let's say you have a budget that's like $1 million. When you get these estimates back and you're seeing the highest price being like 687,000, you're probably like, oh, maybe I should lower my budget. So it helps you plan it out a little bit better. Okay, state tax incentives. You guys have probably heard about this, but each state has a different tax incentive that goes with it. So Kentucky, for example, let's say, I don't know this off the top of my head, but they might have like a 30% tax incentive. So if you go there, any spend that you make in the state for production can be returned to you at a percentage, or like 30% of your budget will be returned to you. So that's why films pick different states to shoot in a lot of the times, because their state tax incentive is really favorable. Like Louisiana has a really great one. And Georgia has it. Well, I think Georgia still has it, a really great one. So that's kind of why like people travel, especially for to different states to shoot their film. And usually like sometimes they'll write a script specifically because they know they can shoot it in a different state that has one of these state tax incentives. And this isn't required. It's just like another bump for you. Like it's a way to, secure your budget a little bit better. But a lot of people don't do this too, especially if it's like lower. It's just kind of like too much to handle. But yeah, if you want to get into state tax incentives, you talk to the film commission office and they set you up, and it's I think you're supposed to get it back after you wrap production and your production is audited. And then equity, that's just investors. So equity investors that want to get involved in film, you would typically take them these estimates over here on the right side and say like, hey, this is what we're projected to make. So if you invest X amount of money, you're projected to make this much back based on these sales estimates. So it's a really good way to kind of give your equity investors some security. And these estimates are obviously not a guarantee, but it is something that a lot of producers and writers do not have when they're trying to make their film. They're usually just trying to sell passion. So this is a really great way to kind of be like, hey, I really think I'm gonna like make you money back, and this is how we can make it. And I'm really like trying to be very detail oriented in this development process. So even that alone kind of gives people some security just to know that you're being really serious about this. And then your low budget financing, like I said, under 250,000 and under, that's typically funded almost 100% equity, because kind of getting sales numbers and tax incentives involved at that low amount just isn't worth it. And you can usually find investors that will finance your film for up to that. Also, there's a lot of financier companies, like production companies, that you can partner with that will put in a little bit. Sales companies sometimes put in a little bit of money. So you can usually get to this number with some good cast. But it's usually like the higher budget that you kind of, I would recommend breaking it up like this. So yeah, like I said, they're typically 100% equity. Low budget also means potentially higher return for a lot of investors, but you typically can't get bigger cast with low budgets, which can hinder your sales potential. So yes, maybe you can get funded, but then you might not be able to pay actors a lot of money, which means you're not going to be able to sell the film for a lot of money, because that's what these estimates are based off of. They're based off of your cast attached. So if you're just going to sales companies and saying like, hey, my movie's really good, but I only have like no names in it, then they're not going to be able to sell it as easily, which means that making that money back is going to be a little bit more difficult. So there's some creative solutions that you would think about early on of how to make your money back that's not just solely cast dependent. And yeah, these estimates are based on cast and are before the sales take their commission fee. So this is the kind of money that they're anticipating, but then sales companies take like a 20% commission. So then you kind of have to factor that in as well. And there's other fees that come along with these returns. So when you start getting returns, it's not just all of it goes to you, unfortunately. Okay, so going from development to pre-production. So before you enter pre-production, your script should have these things. So the great coverage and or feedback. So that includes the, for production companies. There's also a really good site called wescreenplay.com that anyone can do. You could just, you pay for it, but a very professional reader will read your script and give it feedback. And it's really, really detailed feedback. I highly recommend that source. And so you're trying to get your script into the best place possible. That's number one. Number two is you create your pitch deck and or concept video that goes along with your script to send to people as well. You're going to use that for your casting, for your director, for lead cast, for your financiers. It's going to go everywhere. So you definitely need that next. Next would be to attach people, director, producers, and your lead cast. And that is a long process. So it's not just like, okay, I found everybody. Like getting casted and getting people on board can really be a long time, which it should be, because you're going to be working with these people for a few years on a film. So you really want to be careful about who you get involved and make sure that you really trust them, particularly directors and other producers. Then you're going to look into getting your budget done with a line producer or on your own if it's a smaller project. Most or ideally all of your financing is in place. You can sometimes have like 80% of it done and then go like start your prep period and raise the rest of it, because it's a lot easier to raise the rest once you have most of it. I would recommend getting all of it before, but some people don't, and it's okay. So, and you can also attach a sales company early on, which is based on the script and attached cast or director, but mostly the cast, like I've mentioned. Okay. So it's important to note that this development process can and usually does take years, particularly the financing part. So you can really package a script really well. You can have amazing cast. You can even have sales estimates. You can have everybody on board that has all these accolades, and getting financing is just like, it is hard. It is so hard to do, especially in the independent space, even for not the independent space, because the studio system is also very difficult. So if you are trying to get something off the ground and it's just like really difficult, just don't be discouraged. It will happen, and it's very, very normal. So just keep going. I just want to be encouraging about that, because I feel like people are like, oh my gosh, it's been 6 months and I haven't made my movie. It's like, oh, you have a long way to go. So don't be discouraged by that at all. And I put some kind of daunting examples here, but the recent film, The Sound of Metal, was an Oscar nominee this year. It was 13 years to get made. It took James Cameron 8 years to make Avatar, and it took the filmmakers of The Queen's Gambit 30 years to get it made. I won't say that they were like all day, every day for 30 years trying to get this thing made. It was probably like, oh, they got the source material and they tried to get it into different studios and it just never quite worked. And then they redeveloped it. But still, took 30 years for someone to be like, yeah, we'll make this with you in some capacity. Like, that's pretty crazy. I will say that these are very, like I said, daunting examples, but I just want to say, like, this does happen. So if it takes you 2 years, that's amazing. Then you're way ahead of the curve. So don't be discouraged by that at all. Okay, and so this is kind of just an overview of everything I've sort of touched on. So for writers and producers, really spend time with your script. It is the blueprint of the film. Get notes, be okay with doing many drafts. Like, doing 30 drafts is just not atypical. You will do it. Sometimes, like, people will do 15 and then we go into pre-production and they'll have to do 10 more based on, what the logistics are. So just don't be discouraged by that and just be really focused on trying to make this the best script you can, because a great movie is a great script. And no matter the amazing people that you could attach like the most amazing director, amazing cast, and it's still going to come back to what it's about at the end of the day. So all these things can elevate your script. But if it's a bad script, it won't be, it will just be okay. So really just like make sure your script is good and you really feel like you're saying what you want to say and you've spent the time doing that. So also for writers and producers, understand the genre and the typical type of talent that will be best fit for that genre, and also do the characters justice creatively. So, the difference between that commercial and art house kind of thing that I was saying, you probably don't want like to go after an A-list type of actor if you're just making a really small indie. It just doesn't quite make sense. And honestly, their audience probably won't want to watch that type of film. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're kind of making your cast lists and wish lists for that. For writers and producers, also prepare your materials like the pitch deck, sizzles, and budget. Those are very important. And then on this right side, this is kind of just like a producer thing. So for producers, attaching the key roles like the director and cast, that's really falls to the producers. And you'll notice I haven't really touched on casting directors at all, mostly because I have done most of the casting for all of our films. And I like things to be more in our control a little bit. When you have a casting director, you're kind of reliant on them. They can be extremely helpful, like, don't get me wrong, but it's just a preference for me to talk with the agents myself. So you want to make sure at least 1 to 2 cast members have name value, depending on your budget size. The name value is obviously like how big they are and if they can kind of compensate for the budget size that you're going for, based on sales estimates and also just based on their previous work. So you can kind of guess, like, let's say you really want to go for, I'm trying to think of an actor, I don't know, Ryan Gosling, let's just say. I don't know why he's the first actor I thought of, but you're maybe trying to finance like a $1.2 million movie. You would look at his previous work. Has he done that level of budget before? If so, what kind of movie was it and where did it go? That helps you kind of make those choices. And then also for producers, prepare your finance plan based on your budget. Choose where you're going to shoot, like the state particularly, so that way you can factor in any tax incentives. Open up an LLC and a bank account when you're ready, and then get all the money. And that's kind of how you prepare your script for success. And then I have one more slide, yes, with my contact. So yeah, I love, if any of you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer. And, thanks for sticking with a very kind of wide range of topic to get your script going. And go Irish.
Go Irish. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was super interesting. I love hearing about like the producer and the more company side of like how to make your script appealing. It was very cool.
Mm-hmm. Great. Good. I'm glad. Yeah. If you guys have any questions, and also like my email is here, social media, like feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help in any way that I can. But yeah, it is a lot to digest. So
it was cool to see all like the examples of like the budget sheet and everything, because I feel like that's a concept that's usually pretty abstract. So it was very cool to see like the top page that like broke it all
yeah.
down and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of why like having someone do that task for you is so helpful, because like you said, it does seem kind of like overwhelming in a way and you don't quite know how to organize it. And seeing it, broken down is extremely helpful. And you can go through it and be like, hey, I know I can get this location for free. We can mark that down to 0 now and kind of adjust your budget that way. Makes it a lot simpler.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And I had a question for you, actually, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Oh, I'm sorry. The lights in this room keep going off. There we go.
Also, I can stop my screen share so you're not just staring at my page here. There we go. Okay.
So I was curious, for a new writer or someone trying to break into the industry, how would you recommend they go about reaching out to, actors that would, named actors, that, they might not be interested in being in like a newer film or an unknown writer or director?
Yes. So if you're looking for actors that are pretty established, you obviously have to go through their agent, and you should be prepared to kind of give them an offer, because that's what they're used to. So I would say that when you're approaching an agent, you kind of want to just be like, hey, this is what I'm making. This is who I am. You want to intro yourself and then break down your project to be like, this is the log line, a short synopsis. This is the character description. Here's my lookbook. Let me know if you're interested and we could talk more about it. And then they'll kind of ask questions and guide the conversation from there. And then they might be like, okay, well, if you're making an offer, please send that over. We could set up like a Zoom call or something with the writer director and talk more about the character. Typically, the actor really wants to talk to the director. So I wouldn't say that they are looking to even talk to the producer. They're trying to kind of understand the director's vision and how to get into character, and if this is something that they want to do. So I would say to do that when you have somebody that is willing to direct or going to direct the project.
Got it. Very interesting. Thank you.
One question that I have. Sure. So my first comment is I really loved your point about from the beginning about like accepting notes, right? And I think that applies super well. And I kind of never thought about it that way, but I think it's such a great point to keep in mind just in all aspects of life when people are giving you those notes. It's kind of a gesture of that collaboration. So I think that's not a perspective I've had before, but I do really appreciate kind of that thinking.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Helps me reflect on sometimes people have given me notes and I'm like, oh, come on, this thing's perfect. Why are you giving me notes?
Right.
But it's a really good thing to keep in mind that is the start of a collaborative relationship. And
absolutely.
I do really appreciate that. One question I do have though is, you gave us such like a broad array, right, of like kind of all of these different things you're doing. How much of your work, you kind of talked about like lookbooks and mood boards and things like that. How much is creative work versus like managerial? And do you ever get into like, more technical work at all? What's sort of like the breakdown across your, maybe like a year of work?
Like me personally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that for me, most of my time is spent attaching the right people to the project that creatively match well with that project. So if I'm trying to put together a comedy, for example, most of my time is making sure all the cast, director, et cetera, coming onto that are complementing the creative aspect of the project. So that's a lot of what I do. And then also financing. So I'm trying to take that package to all of my relationships, financiers, et cetera, to be like, hey, look at this thing that I have that we've put together that is creatively sound. It's a financially sound project that we think you're going to make money off of. Can you get involved? And that's kind of like most of what I do in development. I didn't touch at all about going on set and like through post-production and distribution, which is also what I do. Because I take a project from a script to distribution and sale. And what I did in this presentation was just kind of like, how do you get from the script to just production? Because that alone is a huge job. So you know, in development, that's kind of like my day to day. And then like when I'm on set, that's a totally different beast in through post, if that kind of answers your question. But I do want to say, I'm glad that you noted that about script collaboration, because it's so, I can't even like stress how many times like writers just don't want to do notes, and it hinders the project so much, because the project stops, it completely stops. And if the writer is just like not okay with like hearing back what people are receiving from the script, the movie will not get made. And unless you're like okay with like working through it with your team and finding like the voice of the script, that those are the movies that get made all the time. So I'm really happy that that resonated with you in some way.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Do you have a particular project? I don't know if you're allowed to talk about your projects or not, but that really stood out to you, or you feel like you learned from or enjoyed?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. I'm working on several projects right now that I'm very excited about. And I would say the first couple projects I ever produced were kind of like a boot camp. They were like, you know, everything was thrown at me where I was like, whoa, I don't know how to do any of this. And I'm just gonna like learn on the go, which is kind of what I did. So in a way, looking back, I'm really thankful for that and very happy I did it. And it's how I met all the people that I'm working with now. So that's been really wonderful. Finding my team kind of was a little bit of a trial and error. So that alone was great with all those projects. I would say each one has kind of its own special thing that it did for me or taught me in some way. And it kind of just made me know like the kind of projects I want to continue to make, creatively, the kind of projects that I like want in the world, basically. And the people I want to work with. So it was definitely a growing process, and I'm still learning, you know. So yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite. I think the ones that I'm working on now are going to be my favorites. So I'm very excited about those. I'll keep you posted on how they go.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
So it looks like we don't have any questions from the room here, but I do have one more, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, no, of course. Go for it.
Okay, so right, my career path, I hope to get into, you know, theme park design, right?
Oh, whoa.
And so,
Okay.
yeah, and so like, it's interesting. So I'm taking a couple FTT classes here at Notre Dame and kind of trying to find the ways I can best apply what we're learning there to like theme parks. So right now I'm taking a sound and music design for digital media with Jeff Spoonhauer. I don't know if he was here at all. When you might have heard.
Yes, he was.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah, so basically though, for the final project, I'm recrafting. What we have to do is he cuts all the audio off a movie scene, and you know, we recraft it. So I'm redoing the audio to a theme park ride instead of a movie scene, like trying to study like the parallels across the two. And so something interesting that happened recently in the theme park world is they built a Guardians of the Galaxy ride out in California and replaced Tower of Terror. And what was like significant about it was that they were able to get all of like the main actors to come and like film the shots for the theme park like ride sequences, right? So obviously you have a very similar yet different world than kind of like what you're talking about here with like, you know, getting the cast. So I guess my question just is, do you have any recommendations on like how that might be translatable into, you know, a theme park ride, whether it's like in that casting process, like trying to say like, hey, you only ever do movies, but would you be willing to do this like 3-minute theme park ride?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, like, just across the board, do you have any advice on how that might be translatable or thoughts in that arena?
Yeah, I mean, well, what I will say is that I know agencies have like agents that kind of handle different things for each actor. So for example, like an actor will have an agent for like their speaking engagements. They'll have an agent for movies or for these kinds of things. And so this isn't like an abnormal thing. And they're kind of used to fielding all different types of requests. So I wouldn't say that that's like a weird thing at all, especially like you see all the time on casting sites, like casting for all stuff like this, like marketing, you know, whatever it is, this isn't like outside of that realm. So I would say to kind of approach it in the same way that you would with a film, and say, this is what I'm doing. This is the concept. Would really love like your involvement in some way. and give your overview. I would also recommend doing some type of lookbook for this. If you had a concept and just like what your vision is, because it's easier for people to grasp onto something and want to get involved if they can visually see it. And then have some type of way that you see them being involved. And then, yeah, I mean, like just going at it in a way that they're kind of familiar with films, for example, and doing it with this being presented to them. I think that they would be receptive for sure.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess just a slight follow-up.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that or I don't expect you to have like the answer to this, but I guess my question then is, you talked a lot about how, I forget the name of the like group that does this, but that go and like talk to the foreign takes and like the US takes, whoever that group is, they would say like, oh, yeah, they're like, oh, we have this cast. How much would you pay for this cast? Now, obviously you can't quite like do that for a theme park because you can't like send the experience out. It's very localized. So I guess my question is, how much of an impact would you, now this is like totally out of your ballpark potentially, but how much impact would that cast have on like the actual attractiveness of the experience, do you think? Or would just getting like a lookalike who's a lot cheaper, sort of pull off the same effect?
Yeah, I think a lookalike could pull off the same effects because you're really selling an experience. You're not necessarily selling the actor. So I think that might be a better route overall. But in terms of like selling the idea and making money off of it, this is like outside of my my expertise a little bit, so I'm trying to like equate it somehow to what I know. And I think that there is like a market in which to be like, just to say that you have somebody involved that has a lot of clout in some way is always going to have a monetary value. So going that route with like a big actor, which I will say, like they're hard to get no matter what you're doing. So don't be surprised if that's a very big uphill battle. But if you do get somebody, it's always like just another way to be like, and it's this awesome thing. It has all these things going for, and this person's involved. It's just going to attract a lot more money and attention. You could also probably get press around it a lot easier. So they kind of like, you can use a name for that alone, like a local press especially. So yeah, the lookalike thing would more, I think, be to sell the experience and to attract people to be like, it's kind of like this, and this is something you're familiar with. You kind of recognize this person in that sense. So yeah, I think there's like two different opportunities there in different ways. I think, the lookalike I think is a lot easier to get. But I will say if you could get some type of actor, it will always be helpful, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you for fielding my left field question.
Was helpful in some way.
Sorry, we lost you for a second.
Where I was able to type of answer. Oh, okay. Am I back?
I think your audio is back, but your screen is frozen. The audio might not be back.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'm glad my internet was okay for.
Oh, now we've got you.
Okay, awesome.
I actually, and Jake, if anyone in the room has a question, by the way, interrupt me because I've asked multiple, but on the takes, the financial takes, I know that in the graph they got added together, and this is just a question that I'm just not familiar with. Can you sell it foreign and domestic, and like they combine?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, two different licenses.
Yes.
Interesting.
So usually, like for example, Netflix buys the entire world. So if you do a Netflix sale, they're gonna have taken up everything, and you can't sell to anywhere else.
Got it.
But usually it's with like with regular distributors, they do each individual area. So yes, but it's two different ones. There's like one that handles domestic, and then there's one that handles foreign.
Got it. Very interesting.
Yeah. Yes. And yeah, actually there's like sales companies do that, and then each distributor is separate. So you'll have like a distributor in each country. So a lot of times, I don't know if you guys have IMDb or anything, or IMDb Pro, but you can look up the distributors on each film, and there's like so many because they're like in so many different countries. So that's very normal. Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, if there are no other questions, I just want to thank you again for joining us and teaching us all about the production side and making a script successful in pre-processing.
Awesome. Yes, exactly. I'm so happy to have done this, and thanks for having me. And I put my contact up on the presentation. Feel free for anyone to reach out if there's anything else.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.